Big Bang and Genesis 1 verse 3. How does the Big Bang fulfill verse 3, which says that God said, "Let there be light," and there was light? According to the Big Bang theory, the creation of the universe began with the release of a billion trillion of degrees of heat, infrared heat, which can be thought of as light, even though it's invisible to human eyes. For it is not invisible to God's sight. It's visible to God, and therefore it can be classified as light. Now, my point is that Genesis 1, verse 3, the creation of light, is actually the start of the creation of the universe according to Genesis 1. Just like it is, the creation of light is the start of the universe according to the Big Bang theory. Now, I have to explain away verse 1 and verse 2. Verse 1 says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." Now, does that mean that verse 1 should be interpreted as ending with the creation? Does the earth exist by the time we finish reading that verse? No, this verse is a headline statement. It's talking about what will be created later on. The narrative starts after verse 1. Verse 1 can be thought of as the credits, like the credits when you see a movie. The credits come before the movie. The credits are not part of the movie. The credits say the movie was created by or produced by so-and-so. Well, this statement here, verse 1, is simply a statement of credits. It's saying God created the universe. Now, so we go to the next verse in order to begin the narrative. Okay, verse 2 says, "The earth was void and without form, and darkness was upon the face of the deep." Now, does this mean the earth is in existence? No, the earth cannot exist yet because Psalm 33, verse 6 and 9 says that God created by pronouncing a creative command. It says, by the word of the Lord was the heavens made. In other words, the universe was made, and by the breath of his mouth, by his command, he commanded, and it stood fast. So there we have the idea of a command preceding the creating of the universe. And there is no command preceding verse 2. So the earth cannot exist in verse 2. The first command is in verse 3, where God says, "Let there be light." And now, some people say this is not a command. But in 2 Corinthians 4, verse 6, it says that God commanded the light to shine out of the darkness. Now, this says that let there be light was a command. So take that, you Ross. You Ross is a Christian astronomer who has a slightly different interpretation of Genesis 1 verse 3 than I do. And he's a great Christian leader. He is the president of Reasons to Believe. I recommend you look it up on online. Okay, I want to continue to explain away verse 2. Verse 2 says, the earth was void and without form. Now, something that is void, totally void, does not exist. Something that is totally void is empty, it's absent, and the same goes with something formless. So we have a 1-2 punch, void and formless, indicating the earth does not, I repeat, does not exist at this point. There's no excuse for saying the earth exists when the Bible clearly says the earth was void, 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 formless, formless, formless. Now, then it says, the Spirit of God hovered above the face of the waters. Now, the waters of the deep, which means the deep means the ocean, the abyss. The waters are not literal either, because the ocean is part of the earth. If the earth, planet Earth, does not exist yet, then the ocean of planet Earth does not exist. So we have to take this ocean as the infinite, fathomless infinity of nothingness, the darkness that existed before the Big Bang. So I want to emphasize that the creation of light in Genesis 1 really is the start of the creation of the universe, just like with the Big Bang Theory. A light in the form of heat, trillions of degrees of heat, which can be called light. This was the beginning of the universe. And so we have complete agreement between the Big Bang Theory and Genesis 1. In case you are not familiar with the light spectrum, look it up and you'll find that it can be thought of as inclusive of things that of radiation which is invisible, including the infrared. If we interpret light by human capacity to see, infrared is not light. But Peter, 2 Peter, chapter 2, verse 20. 2 Peter, chapter 1, verse 20, says that no prophecy of Scripture is of personal interpretation. In other words, God's interpretation, not human interpretation, is the right interpretation. And the same thing can be thought of, same thing can be true with Genesis 1. It's God's point of view as to what is visible that is important. Infrared light, infrared heat is visible to God. So therefore it can be called light. I said earlier that planet Earth does not exist in verse 1 and 2. and 3. Well, just when does planet Earth come into existence? Going by Genesis 1. Well, if we interpret Genesis 1 by the Big Bang, based on the idea that the Big Bang is a general revelation because it comes from studying nature, studying what the skies revealed. You know, Psalm 19 says, the heavens reveal the glory of God. In other words, the skies reveal information about God, which is glorious. And it's by studying the stars, starlight, that the scientists have found the universe is expanding, and so the Big Bang comes from that discovery. And my point was that the Big Bang is general revelation. You know, there are 2 revelations of God by God. General revelation, which means what we discover of God by studying nature, and then there's special revelation, which is the Bible. Now, the point was both revelations work together, like yin and yang, or like male and female. Now, if we interpret Genesis 1 by the Big Bang, the extension of the Big Bang says the solar system came into existence as a package. The sun, the moon, and the sun and the moon and the planets came into existence together. And we have sun and moon and stars, which we can interpret as the planets. They come into existence in day 4. So that's when the Earth comes into existence by Genesis 1. So day 2 and day 3, we have to take the Earth non-literally. Okay, how can we take day 2? How can we interpret day 2? It says the waters are separated from the waters above the firmament, or we can call it the expanse. From the waters below the expanse. Now, if we go by the Big Bang, what happened after the Big Bang? Expansion. Super expansion. This thing called inflation is super expansion. And so day 2 fits this idea of expansion, because the word rakia, rakia is the firmament in the King James Version, but it is the expanse in the NIV and in many other versions. Now, what is this expanse in Genesis 1? Well, we can take it as the same way as the Big Bang Theory. In the Big Bang Theory, the rakia separates the waters from the waters. Now, we know the rakia is actually the outer edge of the universe. As light goes forth, that's the edge of the universe. Think of the outer edge of the universe as a ripple on a pond. That ripple separates what is outside that ripple from what is within that ripple. And the waters beyond the universe is simply the void beyond the universe. And the waters within the universe, that's simply the hydrogen within the universe. In other words, curved space. Curved space contains hydrogen, and hydrogen is part of water, H2O. So therefore, we have a basis for saying that the universe is the second waters. The waters behind or be within the rakia, the expanse, the outer edge of the universe. Okay, so much for day 2. We move on to day 3, where the waters recede from the earth, and the earth is exposed. Now, this is talking about the appearance of islands, because if you have a land and the land is uneven, as the waters recede, you have hilltops appear, which are islands. And what are galaxies? Galaxies are islands in the seas of space, islands of light. And so we take day 3 metaphorically, and it's talking about the formation of galaxies. First of all, in day 1 and 2, we have a gas cloud of hydrogen. And as that gas cloud expands, it breaks up into several gas clouds, which are actually proto-galaxies. And as they condense, first of all, they're going out, but at the same time they go out, they're also condensing. And they become galaxies. And so this would be the islands in day. This would be the land in day 3. Now the land is covered by vegetation. Now what would this vegetation be? Well, we know the land is galaxies. Now what covers galaxies? Light of stars, and so that is the vegetation. And the fruit trees have fruit. Well, what would the fruit trees be? Well, if you look at a star from above, if you look at a tree from above, you have a circle. The tree trunk is a circle, and the peaches encircling the trunk would stand for the planets that are held in place by gravity, just like branches hold peaches in place around a peach tree. That's it for day 3. We move on to day 4. Day 4 is the stars there. Okay, the real stars were created in day 3, according to the interpretation that I just presented. But day 4, there's 2 types of stars, according to ancient man. The ancient civilizations took planets as wandering stars. So that would be the type of stars that apply in day 4. When you explain something, you go from the general to the specific, from the general to the particular. Now, Genesis 1 goes from the presenting of the creating of the universe, the general picture, the overall universe, and then it has to go at some point to the particular, to the specific, has to go down, has to zoom in on what? Our solar system. So that's what's going on from the shift from day 3 to day 4. We're going from galaxies in day 3 to a particular solar system, our solar system, in day 4. So the stars there would refer to whatever a type of stars would apply to our solar system, which would be wandering stars. The Greek word for wanderer is planetes. And okay. So now we go on to day 5, which is the creation of the fish and the birds. The birds are like fish because the sky is like the ocean because it contains water. And so how do we interpret this? We take it inclusively. We go with the fish and everything up to the birds. In other words, the fish, the amphibians, and the reptiles, and then modified reptiles, which are birds. And then we move on to day 6, the mammals. And the mammals are actually, as far as time is concerned, they're in day 5, but the supremacy of the mammals is in day 6. And we have like 3 groups of mammals plus man. We have the beasts of the field. We have cattle. Then we have the beasts of the field, and then we have the creeping thing, and then we have man. And so if we think of this chronologically or sequentially, we have, let's say, the herbivores, because there was plants on the land before the animals came onto the land. And so the first animals would be the herbivores, I'm guessing, of course. And then we have the predatory animals, which are the carnivores, and they would be the beasts of the field. And then we have the creeping things, which we'll be talking about a particular type of creeping thing, because we're trying to bridge the gap between the mammals and man. And so we have the primates, or the ancestors of the primates, which would be the tree shrews. The tree shrews, I think the idea is they go on to produce the lemurs, and then we have the monkeys, and then the apes, and then of course man. Okay. All right. All right. Okay. Okay. Oh dear. We have the idea that God likes to delegate the work. He likes to farm it out. And okay, let's see. What am I saying? God delegates the creation process to nature to create creatures that reproduce after their own kind. But it says that God produces, that the waters produce abundantly. And the same thing with the land. The land produces abundantly. So here, it's not just the land producing creatures that reproduce after their own kind. The land and the sea are producing many species. So how is this accounted for? Besides producing species that produce after their own kind, the implication is that nature is producing new species through the old species. The early species produce later species so that there can be an abundance of species. But here we have a separation between everything that comes before man and man. Because instead of saying that nature produces, cattle and the beast and this creeping thing and man, it stops with the creeping thing. And then it says, let God produce after our own kind. In terms of let us produce man in our image and likeness. So there's a separation between God, between the animals and man. Between the animals and man. You see, God can use chance, random mutations to produce various life forms. But chance cannot account for the the creation of man, because there's too much improbability. God had to put his thumb on the scales. God had to play with loaded dice as far as the creation of man. God had to step in. God had to step in with the creation of man. Okay, there's one more thing I want to end with. One more thing I want to say. I want to end with this. These days have to be taken as eons, because Paul the Apostle in Hebrews 11 verse 3 clearly says in the Greek that by faith we understand that the eons were framed by the Word of God. In the Greek it says eons. It doesn't say worlds. There's actually 3 Bible versions that use the word eons or ages. It's a time word because the original Greek is a temporal word. Eons is A-I-O-N-O-S. It's the Greek word that is the basis for the English word eon. Look up the word eon, the English word eon, in a dictionary that gives the derivation. It comes from the Greek. It clearly says the Greek word was spelled A-I-O-N-O-S. And that's the word that's used here. It's perfectly reasonable, perfectly justifiable to translate that Greek word with the word ages or eon. And so we have the basis for the old earth position. Paul is giving us in the book of Hebrews the Christian version of the creation story. You know, the book of Hebrews, it gives us the Christian version of sacrifice, the Christian version of the priesthood, the Christian version of the Sabbath, which is in chapter 4. Another rest, in other words, Sunday. And Paul goes on to give us a Christian version of the creation's account. Hebrews 11 verse 3. Even without Hebrews 11 verse 3, we have a perfectly reasonable reason for going with the old earth. In Genesis 1, Moses is clearly multitasking in Genesis 1. On one hand, he's giving us the account of the creation of the universe and the world. On the other hand, he is he is giving us a basis for a 7-day work week, a 7-day week, a 6-day work week. And so it would be only natural if the time of the creation of the universe was a long period of time, it would be only natural for Moses to think in terms of a 7-day week to give legitimacy to a 7-day week on the human level, a 7-day, 24-hour day week, to give that legitimacy by putting the larger week in terms of 24-hour days. But because he's actually creating a week besides giving us the creation account, we can go with the old earth. But I want to say one more thing. He gives us days that are divided into evening and morning. Now there's 7 days in this week, and so there are 7 days divided into 2 parts each, and so there's actually 14 periods, and so that agrees perfectly with the Big Bang Theory, which says the Big Bang, the age of the universe, is divided into 14 periods, 14 billion years. And so the 14 in Genesis 1 agrees with the 14 in the Big Bang Theory. You can communicate with me through joegrace at gmail.com. JOEGRACE at gmail.com.